Welcome in to Check the Mic. It's Steve Palazzolo, Sam Monson. We're here on a Monday morning, YouTube, wherever you're listening to podcasts. And hey, we've got a couple things to explain about the feed right now. We're also live on the PFF show. We're in both places. This is like Rick Rude being on Monday Night Raw and Monday Nitro on the same night back in 1997. Does anybody get that reference? Did anybody even get it? Okay, great. Well, that's where we are. We just have some updates on where we're going to be. Be sure to check out the PFF shows, by the way. It's Monday right now. Our final show at PFF is going to be Wednesday. A little send-off, little nostalgia. But right here on the Check the Mic feed, you're going to have all sorts of regularly scheduled programming starting this Thursday.
Yes, we've got a couple of little bridge shows, what we're talking about right now, on the Check the Mic feed, but regular scheduled programming, the long monster shows that you have become accustomed and, let's face it, eager to hear from myself and Steve. They're coming as of August the 22nd. So this Thursday, you're going to have season previews. We're going to have all the division previews coming out, and we'll be doing a giant live extravaganza show. Well, not live. We'll be live there. You won't be live. In Las Vegas at Circa Casino, talking about the upcoming season, MVP, who's going to win all the awards, all that kind of stuff. So all of our regular scheduled programming is coming soon, just not quite yet.
Yeah, so be sure to hit that subscribe button. Be sure to join us so that when all of our NFC previews drop, and you'll have them all by the end of this week, when they all drop by the end of the week, they'll all be hitting your feed right away. By next week, we'll have all the AFC shows done. And then Labor Day week, that's the first week of the NFL season. And that's our regular cadence, Sam. We'll have a very special Wednesday show leading into the season, some special guests. And then Thursday, it's the marathon, Sam. It's our week one preview. And then we'll be previewing and reviewing every single game of the NFL season starting that week.
Yep, let's go.
All right, so again, be sure to check us out on the PFF show and be right here with us on Check the Mic. What we're doing today on the Bridge show is a little contender and pretender, and so we get to pick three teams, Sam, three teams each. You could pick two contenders, one pretender. You know, we'll mix it up. I'm positive over here, so I might have two contenders. I don't like to make fan bases upset. We'll see what you end up doing, but I'll let you kick things off. You get to choose a contender or a pretender from any team in the NFL.
Well, I also skewed positive, Steve. It's a new feed. It's a new me. You know, I'm going to skew positive as well. We're all about giving hope to teams as they enter the NFL season, even if that hope is going to be short-lived. So I've also gone with two contenders. Let's start with my first one. I wasn't necessarily a total believer in this team, but preseason happened, and like everybody else, preseason has completely changed my opinion based off just a handful of snaps, and that's entirely logical. So I believe, like they do, that the Houston Texans are legitimate contenders.
I like it. I mean, I agree that they are. I mean, I think what they did in the offseason combined with C.J. Stroud at quarterback heading into year two, their preseason feels like they've taken care of business, right? Like they went out there and in all their offseason moves where they're supposed to be the favorite in the AFC South now. They're supposed to be maybe the team that's going to sneak past the Ravens, sneak past the other teams, the Bills in the AFC, and challenge the Chiefs. They've kind of played like that on both sides of the ball as well. Dominant defense, effective offense when C.J. Stroud has been out there. Really exciting offseason for the Texans.
It just felt crisp. You know, they went out there with the first team offense. They're spreading the ball around. They're hitting all of those weapons. You know, it's like, oh, here's Stephon Diggs. Here's Tank Dell for a touchdown. Dalton Schultz is going to be a part of it. Nico Collins is getting plays. C.J. Stroud just looks so accomplished in year two. Our friend Bobby Slowick, former colleague, is just there calling the offense. We know that offense is absolutely fantastic. They haven't even had, the full starting offensive line out there yet, I don't think. Laramie Tunsil hasn't been out there at left tackle, and he's their best player. And as you said, the defense has been really good as well. So, I think generally my approach this offseason has been, obviously, Houston thinks they're contenders. That's why you bring in a Stephon Diggs literally as a one-year rental the way they redid his contract. It's why you bring in Danielle Hunter as opposed to keeping maybe Jonathan Grenard or trying to get younger rather than more experienced and older and more expensive at the position. They clearly think that they're contenders. And my kind of instinct to that has been to push back a little bit and say, development isn't always this nice linear step. Maybe they're not going to just take another step forward because they were so good last year. Maybe they'll even just stay where they were and be slightly behind the top contenders. But man, they look ready for it so far in preseason.
The other piece I'll add too, it's year 2 of DeMeco Ryans, a defensive-minded head coach. I thought they showed flashes down the stretch of what his defense should look like, especially, his history with the 49ers. And you have Derek Stingley heading into year 3 and Will Anderson heading into year 2. The year 2 jump for edge rushers is a big one, and Anderson already looked like a star as a rookie. The year 3 jump for Stingley as a corner, who looked awesome right after the first few weeks last year, and showing it again in the preseason. They have star power on that defensive side of the ball, plus the aggressiveness and the hard-nosed style that DeMeco Ryans brings. As much as I like to talk about this Houston offense, I think the defense also takes a big step forward this year as well. So I think Houston, I'm with you, man. They have all the pieces, not just to contend and win the AFC South. They do have all the pieces to make a run at the Chiefs in the AFC. I'm going to buy in to preseason hype too. So I'm going to go preseason hype, and I've never done this before, right? I've never been burnt by this. I've never watched, 30 snaps of a starting unit and said, there it is, sold.
Never.
But I'm going Chicago Bears are contenders. I'm doing it.
Whoa.
I've seen enough from Caleb Williams. I've seen enough. I know he's bailing from clean pockets and chucking it downfield, 40-yard dimes. I know. I know it's not always perfect by the book. But I think the Bears, year 3 of Ryan Poles, adding depth on both sides of the ball, still have some concerns about their defense to take that next step, but I think Caleb Williams just has the star power to hit the ground running and make this team a contender right away.
Wow. So what about if I stay quiet for a moment, point you at the microphone and let you get out your most aggressive, largest amount of hyperbole possible for Caleb Williams? Just how good is he, Steve?
Patrick Mahomes? I mean, he does Patrick Mahomes type stuff, right? Does he not do Patrick Mahomes type stuff? Like, Tyreek Hill was hinting at it on Twitter. He's like, hey, he reminds me of somebody, and I know it's not Tua. He's not reminding Tyreek Hill of Tua. Tua, who is paint by the numbers, play within the offense, do it really well, do it really quickly. It's Patrick Mahomes, who's you can't ask Picasso to paint by the numbers, right? You got to let them play. You got to let them cook, and that's how Caleb Williams plays. I mentioned in the past and coming out of the draft, he's the best on-the-move thrower, or one of the best on-the-move throwers in the NFL already. I think we saw that in the first 2 preseason games from Caleb Williams. He's got natural instincts and natural feel. Now, look, the results might not look like Patrick Mahomes. I don't think we're talking about 3 championships in his first 6 years. I don't know that that's necessarily the result. I don't think he's necessarily going to be the very top quarterback in the NFL, hands down, by year 5. But look, the way he plays the game, the natural instincts, ability to play within the pocket, he could still do it, and outside the pocket, natural feel, and all of that looks like it plays on an NFL field. Look, I know it was against the backups against the Bengals this weekend, but it was against the starters of the Bills in week 1. All of the traits play, and the guy just understands and feels the game in a different way. He'll have some ups and downs. He'll have some rookie lumps, I think, but overall, Caleb Williams has all the tools to be a star in this league, and I think we see it really, really quickly at some point in his rookie season here.
Yeah, I will say that Caleb Williams is the guy this year where you are fighting against the demon, the devil in your shoulder who's saying, go nuts, lose control of yourself. He's real. Right. He's Mahomes. Do it. And the angel on the other side over here is like, come on, it's only preseason. It's against the backups. You know better than that. You've seen this kind of thing before. We know not to get too out of control based off a few preseason snaps. But the snaps that we're seeing are crazy. Obviously, it's connected to his college career as well. We've seen him do this kind of thing at a different level. And you're seeing the next step up. It does still play. There was like a 3-play sequence where all 3 of them were Caleb Williams just being Caleb Williams. And they were all incredible. And you're like, okay, there is another step to go, right? Preseason to regular season, but it's hard not to get excited right now about what we're seeing from Caleb Williams.
In addition to, the additions that they made at receiver, right? Again, if we said before the draft, hey, they're going to come out of this with Caleb Williams and a receiver in Rome Odunze, who's wide receiver 1 in most draft classes, and adding Keenan Allen to the mix with DJ Moore locked up. So you also have the playmakers there to support Caleb Williams, an ascending defense, all the pieces for the Bears to be contenders. Yeah, I'm doing it. I'm buying in after the preseason in the Bears.
All right. Let me give you my
All right, who you got?
pretender. I'm gonna put it in the middle. I'm gonna have a nice little pretender sandwich with the optimism on either side. So my pretender this year is the Miami Dolphins. And I feel bad about this, right? Because I think, again, they're going to start the season really well. I think Mike McDaniel is going to come into the season with a new, little bit of an edge in terms of schematics, in terms of the scheme, opening up exactly like last year with all that cheat motion stuff where it just broke the league for the first half of the year. I think Tua's going to look great. I think the offensive firepower, the speed, everywhere, all over that offense is going to look amazing. And for the first half of the year, the Miami Dolphins are going to look like contenders. And then I think the same thing is going to happen, that they're going to run out of steam and teams are essentially going to figure them out, quote unquote, over the course of the year. And it's that second adjustment period. It's the late in the year when the best teams in football have figured out how teams are defending them, how teams are taking away what they like to do, and they've countered the counter. That's where Miami have fallen down the last couple of years. Last year, obviously, it was made even worse by the injuries that they suffered. But I just think they're going to run out of steam, and they're not going to be able to hang again with the Chiefs in January in cold weather, and it's almost going to be a complete repetition of last year.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it depends on how you define this. The way you define it, it's tough to argue, but I think I'm more of a believer in the Dolphins that they can get over the hump. I think if you look at this rationally, and we don't always look at things rationally, we're heading into year 3 for Mike McDaniel. We've seen growth from Tua under Mike McDaniel over the last couple of years. Last year was just, hey, can Tua stay healthy the entire season? He did make that move. And you're right. I mean, down the stretch, they had no pass rushers. They were pulling pass rushers from the class of 2011 draft class off the street to try to rush Patrick Mahomes in 30 below weather in Kansas City. I think the way you position it, though, they could be a 10 or 11 win team, but when they get into the playoffs, can they beat Kansas City? Can they beat Buffalo? Can they beat your Houston Texans, right? Can they beat the perceived best teams in the AFC? And I think that's a fair criticism. I wouldn't be ready to put the Dolphins in the pretender category, though, because I still think they're on the ascent. They're still on the way up. It is a matter, though, much like the Dallas Cowboys, how do you win? Not just the big one, but just win against the best teams. How do you find a way? Because Tua has been a guy that plays well within the system, and he is awesome at playing within the system. He plays with anticipation. He throws to space. He is a great fit. But when things get a little bit tougher, when things get a little bit colder, that has been the question. I don't think it's a false narrative on Tua, but I really think it's against the better teams. They have to get over this front runner type of mentality. We could drop 70 on a depleted Broncos defense in week 3, but then you're only scoring, 2 touchdowns against Kansas City a couple weeks later. You have to find a way to win against the better defenses in the NFL. I think that's the biggest thing for the Dolphins to get over the hump and not be pretenders this season.
All right, so who's your final team?
So I'm only at 2, Sam. You started.
Oh,
I got
2.
2.
My bad.
I got one more contender and then my pretender. So I'll stick with one more contender here. I'm going Cincinnati Bengals as a contender. Now, this is a little different than the preseason hype. They've had some injuries. The offensive line is injured for the 17th straight season, so they're a little banged up. But Joe Burrow's healthy. And I think when Joe Burrow's healthy, people forget just how good they are. People forget that in 2021, they went from a run-heavy team where Joe Burrow was throwing the ball about 25 times per game, and once they gave him the ball, once they turned it over to Joe Burrow, and he's dropping back 50, 55 times in games against the Kansas City Chiefs, against the best teams in the league, against the Ravens, and they put the ball in Joe Burrow's hands, made it his team, and then they go on a Super Bowl run. And they also have Zach Taylor, who, when Joe Burrow has been the quarterback, they have done a great job of bouncing back from disappointments. And every time you would say, same old Bengals, they're coming back down to earth, they didn't do it, right? They showed that they're one of the best teams in the league. Now, they beat Kansas City in an AFC championship. They lost to Kansas City in an AFC championship, but they've shown that they're absolutely contenders as long as Joe Burrow's healthy. And then if you look at what they've done since last year, shoring up the secondary, fixing some of those communication problems, adding more depth at receiver with guys like Jermaine Burton, and still having T. Higgins in the building. And I know the offensive line is banged up at the moment, but they should be able to have enough depth, maybe at least by week 6 or 7 once the guys get a little bit healthier. So I think the Bengals have all the pieces to remind people, when Joe Burrow's healthy, this is a top 2 or 3 team in the AFC.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you with that. I think Burrow is a quarterback that is transformational and good enough by himself to change the entire fortunes of a team, put them on the fringes of the postseason into a legitimate contender status. I worry a little bit about some areas of depth or some areas of potential weakness on the roster. I think it's maybe not the best Bengals roster that they've had in the last few years, but if Burrow is healthy, I think he's good enough to make the difference. And the only thing is, that's becoming a bigger caveat than it has been. Every one of these subsequent injuries makes you a little bit more concerned about whether you're going to get a full sort of 20-game schedule for Joe Burrow.
Yeah, I mean, the other piece of it, too, did the Ravens take a slight step back this offseason? I still think they're going to be very good. They got better in some areas, bringing in a Derrick Henry, but they're reshuffling an offensive line, right? There are some questions there. They lose Mike McDonald on the defensive side of the ball. The Cleveland Browns, as much as I love their roster, still have the question at quarterback, and Deshaun Watson, can he finally put it all together? Because if he plays at the same level, they're about a 500 team. And the Steelers, again, not to overrate preseason, but it doesn't look like they've solved quarterback so far with Russell Wilson or Justin Fields. So as deep as I think the AFC North is, I think the Bengals have all the pieces to be the best team there and be the contender coming out of the North once again.
Yep. No,
all right,
that makes sense. All right, my final team, the contender New York Jets, something that can't possibly have been said for quite some period of time at this stage. I feel like the vibes around the Jets are all negative this offseason, but like a year ago, it was the opposite. A year ago, everyone was like, oh, the Jets are contenders. They've got Aaron Rodgers. They're going to go to the Super Bowl. Rodgers to Garrett Wilson. It's going to tear up the league. Look at that defense. Everything is basically the same. It's just that Rodgers popped his Achilles after 4 snaps, so now it's like, well, that experiment failed. I sort of feel like we just reset, right? Okay, there's a bit of turnover. Things have changed. The Hassan Reddick thing is not making them look great this offseason. That's not helping the vibes, the fact that they traded for this guy and can't get him in the building. But overall, all of those pieces that made everybody so excited last year are still there. Rodgers to Garrett Wilson has the potential to detonate the league. The offensive line that was the biggest problem a year ago has been massively overhauled and upgraded. And that defense, even though it's undergone some turnover and some change, is still theoretically one of the best groups in the NFL. Best corner in the NFL in Sauce Gardner. Incredible depth up front. Legitimate game changers, guys like Quinnen Williams. I don't see a reason why the Jets cannot be legitimate Super Bowl contenders as long as Rodgers comes back. Not even 100%. Like anywhere from 75% upwards. And the Jets are contenders.
Well, the Jets are my pretenders, Sam. That was my third team. I was going the opposite end for the Jets here. Look, I like all the moves that they made this offseason. They made the right moves. And normally, when you make those moves, you bring in a veteran Mike Williams, you bring in a veteran Tyron Smith, you bring in the great Morgan Moses. These are all older veterans. I usually love those moves. They brought in some names, established players. Of course they're going to play well. But for right now, I'm going to look at the other side of it and the risk associated with those guys. You brought in injury-prone Mike Williams. You brought in older injury-prone Tyron Smith. Morgan Moses still durable. Can't hate that. But they also misread the Hassan Reddick situation, right? You let a Bryce Huff walk. You trade for Hassan Reddick and misread that entire situation. So my issue with the Jets, Aaron Rodgers is still 40. I don't know what he's going to be. We haven't seen him play his best football in a couple of years now. He was already regressing a little bit with the Packers the last time we saw him in 2022. Is he going to be more injury prone too as he heads into his 40-year-old season? Remember, Tom Brady just broke all the rules when it comes to 40-year-old quarterbacks. Drew Brees fell off in his 40s, right? Like most quarterbacks do, and you're banking on Aaron Rodgers, being that guy still, being the guy that could carry this team. Even though, to your point, hey, if he's only average with the defense they've had the last couple of years, it'll still be enough. But my question is on that defensive side of the ball, can they actually be that good for a third straight year? Defense is the type of defense tends to fluctuate a little bit as far as performance goes, and it feels like the Jets have gotten away with it for 2 straight years. They played those lower scoring games. They had to play, with Zach Wilson at quarterback and know, hey, we can't give anything up. I don't know if they can get away with that again, especially down potentially one of those elite pass rushers in Bryce Huff or Hassan Reddick, if they can't replace that elite pass rush that they've had over the last couple of years. So the other piece of this is your pretender, the Dolphins, I still think are going to be really good. I'm still a believer in the Buffalo Bills despite all the turnover on their roster. You're talking about a deep AFC East that is going to be challenging for the Jets. So, look, I don't love calling them pretenders here, you know. And if you catch me on another show, I might say they're contenders. I might say the other. I might say the opposite.
Right.
But for the sake of this show, I'll say the Jets are pretenders because of all those veteran injury-related question marks that they have on the roster.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think every single team in the NFL you can find some kind of concerns for. But I think the Jets did a good job of ensuring against those risks, right? You bring in Tyron Smith. We know he's injury-prone. He tends to miss a lot of games. When he's on the field, you're going to get an average PFF grade above 90. He's still an elite shutdown left tackle, but he's probably going to miss some games. So you spend a first-round draft pick on a guy who might be the best pass blocker in the draft in Olu Fashanu out of Penn State. Yes, the Bryce Huff, Hassan Reddick dynamic looks terrible right now, but you have former first-round pick Will McDonald there who theoretically can step into that Bryce Huff role of a situational pass rusher, even though they're talking about, well, he needs to bulk up to set the edge. You don't need him to set the edge. Cut him loose. Let him rush the passer. That role already exists within the defense. Bryce Huff just walked out of it. Plug him right into those snaps. So I feel like every one of those concerns the Jets have some answers for, and that's why I think ultimately Rodgers with that team makes them into legit contenders.
Yeah, I get it. Like I said, a lot of the moves the Jets make, you know, I give the thumbs up. I thought it's the right move, but it's usually because I look at those moves through the rosy-colored glasses. Guys will stay healthy. Guys will live up to their expectations. There's just some risk associated with some of the veterans that they brought in as well. So there you have it. We have some contenders. We have some pretenders. We're calling it the Bridge Show. It's the bridge to the official Check the Mic launch, which is this Thursday, August 22nd. In the meantime, here's what we have going on. PFF NFL podcast. We're on there today on Monday, August 19th. And then the final PFF show for us, Sam, is August 21st, a little send-off. We'll say our thank yous. We'll tell some stories, have some fun. And, we hope everybody joins us for that as well. Then we'll turn that feed over to PFF. And then we're following through here with Check the Mic and unleashing, Sam, all of our division preview content, NFC by the end of this week, AFC by the end of next week.
And then obviously
Sound
by
good?
the time the season rolls around, we get our regular schedule. We get the preview show, the review show, and a fancy Wednesday show with potential guests and surprise additions and all the kind of new value-add stuff we can add. And then who knows what else we'll experiment with over the course of the season to try and find the best possible content for all you guys.
Can we even announce who we're talking about for the big Wednesday show? I mean, we're gonna I think unleash that the day before. I mean, look, we're gonna talk about something that on the PFF NFL podcast, I vowed that I hated. Stuff that I hated talking about, stuff that you would always bring up, and I would always try to say, I don't want to talk about it. And then here we are. We're just gonna do segments on this every single Wednesday during the season. So I've sold out, but I think it's gonna be great. I think it's gonna be great for the viewers and listeners every single Wednesday during the season.
So tune in to hear Steve upset. It's perfect.
Yeah, tune in to see me upset every Wednesday. And then, like Sam said earlier, the same long-form content, right? So we generally average about 2.5 hours on a Monday morning, going team by team, game by game through the previous Sunday. And we generally average about 2 hours on a Thursday previewing every single game. So we'll be right back into that cadence. We've had a lot of questions. When does the traditional Steve and Sam and Steve, when does the traditional flow to the show start? You'll start to see some of that again this Thursday, August 22nd. Sound good?
Yep.
All right. We appreciate everybody tuning in. We appreciate everybody watching or listening. Again, it's a new feed. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you get all the great Check the Mic action right when it is released.